everybody. My name is Kevin McKay. This is the SPACECARATZ podcast. And basically, this is going to be my first podcast. And I have really good camera. As you can tell, the picture quality is probably looking nice. Got good lighting in here, nice blue lights in the back. I want this podcast to be about a lot of different things. I'm going to cover like a whole range of topics, and it's really just a lot of stuff I'm interested in, and so I'm hoping good things will come from this. Obviously, like most people who start a podcast, you might see some changes over the next couple episodes. What I want to start off is basically introducing myself. um, if I haven't said it already, my name is Kevin. I have a bachelor's degree in bachelor's of science degree in biological science from North Carolina State University. Okay, I got my degree up on the wall. You can't see it right now, but So pretty much, I'm gonna start talking about some cool stuff that interests me. I'm starting an organic farm down the street from where I live here in New Jersey. And it's been a pretty awesome experience. I've done like a lot of work on organic farms in the past, and this chair is loud. But I need one of those podcasting mics, like a actual podcasting mic. I'm using a shotgun mic on the on my camera right now. I got a GH6, pretty cool. They're great cameras. But starting an organic farm down the street from where I live, and it's been like really intense. You probably can't tell, but I've been getting sunburned every day. I usually don't tan. I'm like 100% Irish. So with some other like less than 1% stuff going on there. You know how those genealogy reports work. But so I'm on my farm and I'm working really just. It was almost like 100 degrees today, so I kind of just looking to stay inside today and figure out some other stuff. But if you see me sweating here, it was a hot day. So it's pretty good. It's been rough taking care of these plants on my farm. Really, I got a lot of tomatoes and I got a lot of stuff in right now. I'm a little behind because I didn't have a greenhouse this summer. So kind of just really working on. You might hear my neighbors driving in, but I didn't have a greenhouse this summer. So I kind of just really started plants inside my apartment and with like a grow light and a heat mat, and it's been cool. I got some pretty good varieties of tomatoes and cucumbers and stuff like that in the ground right now. I'm looking to get squash in real soon, so it's pretty good timing. I'm a little late for stuff like corn. So I'm hopefully going to be planting corn seeds, like heirloom corn, like this week, and so we'll see how it goes in August or October. But so I'm really interested in organic farms. I really love I've worked on organic farms for years since I got out of high school in like 2010, 2009, and started working on organic farms and learned a lot. Had some really interesting experiences, but actually I could probably talk about on some other episodes. So it's been really great. I'm a really big advocate for organic farms, and I think organic farms are probably some of the most important things that the entire world needs to be focusing on. We need to, they say swords into plowshares type thing, but we really need to be working on those plowshares because we got food prices here in the United States are going up and up, and we have so much land available and almost no infrastructure in this country. They want to grow food, the most amount of food on the smallest amount of land, because that's how economics works, and it's just not. It's not a great way of living for people. We need more food. We need lower prices food. More food brings lower priced food, and since they want to grow as much food on a small amount of land as possible, it really messes up you know, people's ability to have like good lives and fulfilling lives, because people are worrying about how much money they're spending at a grocery store, which is, nobody should ever be doing that. In the future where we're building robots and automation, and we're spending $500 billion on AI, we should be spending money on better infrastructure for farmers to create cleaner, better, more nutritious food, not GMOs. We don't need genetically engineered food, okay? And so I'd really like to talk about some other stuff that's kind of caught my attention over the years, and I've been wanting to create a podcast on this for the longest time, and it's been really interesting watching it plan out. Obviously, in a bad way, unfortunately, but so the war in Ukraine, right? My theory, right? You won't hear many people say this at all. I'd be surprised. I'd like to speak to people who think this as well, and who are kind of curious about this as well. But prior to the war in Ukraine starting, right? Prior to the war in Ukraine starting, the Ukraine Parliament, right? Late 2021, draft a bill to allow for genetically engineered foods to be grown in Ukraine, right? And Ukraine's like the breadbasket of Europe. It's like one of the major farming areas in the entire European continent. And so it's really interesting how Russia, being Mother Russia, and the history of Russia and Kiev, it's really interesting how Russia kind of like wants to oversee the culture of Ukraine, sort of as like a father mother figure, or whatever you want to call it, and how Putin kind of deals, started the war right after, right, beginning of February 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, was right after they drafted the GMO bill, and so there's been a lot of fighting going on over there, and not only that, which I think is really weird, is the farms over there are now littered with those the drone, the manned drone with the cables now. So it's like, which is a wild way of warfare, isn't it? It's like they're using mile-long cables to fly little drones that can't be taken down with whatever, microwaves or some shit like that. Which is, I have another theory on microwaves. All right, I have a feeling back in the 50s, when they started putting microwaves, or 60s, whatever, when they started putting microwaves in everybody's house and made that a trend, they were just getting Americans ready for the coming drone wars. They must have been, because the microwaves are they can be turned into a serious implement to just to take down drones and other technology that's wireless and remote like that. So it's really interesting. But what I found was really interesting as the Ukraine war started to play out, right? There was one lieutenant, right? I wrote it down here. His name was Igor Krylov, right? And so he was the head of Russia's Radiation, Chemical, and Biological Protection Forces, right? And this guy said that that NATO had bioweapons labs in the Ukraine, right? And so I thought that was interesting, because what my knowledge prior to understanding that the war started right after that bill they drafted, I thought that was kind of interesting, because NATO is really involved with genetically engineered crops, and so it's interesting how they made how this guy made that connection, saying that there was bioweapons labs. And so I thought that was really wild. And not only that, but that guy got assassinated a year later, or 2 years later, in 2024, December 2024. That guy gets assassinated by a scooter bomb. I don't know if you guys remember that. I remember that happened. I was like, well, that was that guy that said that there was bioweapons labs. And so clearly the biotech elite, the biotech corporations that are literally masquerading over the whole world and trying to control everybody through biotechnology, which we saw getting out of you know with all stuff that I probably can't say on here because then they're gonna monetize me, but I'll say it anyway. Vaccinations and stuff like that, and mandatory vaccinations. These are biotech companies that really we should have greater. We should be monitoring these companies much more and like what they're doing, because it's odd and suspicious that a whole engineered virus gets out, engineered COVID virus gets out, right? That they've already said that that it was engineered in a lab, and there was reason to believe that it was engineered from the beginning because it had stuff as part of the genome, the viral genome, that like indicated that it was like engineered, right? There's like what do they call it, primer strips or something like that of genes that where they can insert engineered genes that are cause whatever pathogenic effects that they're looking for. And so yeah, so it's really really interesting how there is like this looming threat of a biotech secret group. It sounds conspiratorial, but it definitely exists. I personally, my theory, right, or hypotheses. um, and so it's interesting. And now in Ukraine, they've now passed GMOs, and they're ready to, in 2026, they're going to start farming GMOs in Ukraine now. And so the thing is, like, GMOs are not necessary at all. They're not necessary at all. There is so many significant better ways of farming in all over the world, right? And so, as I mean to say that they're not necessary, is that you can look it up yourself. I can put some references in this podcast that I'll link in like a description or at the end of this video, to the fact that the yields of GMOs aren't even that much greater than organic or conventionally grown foods that aren't GMO or genetically engineered. And that's something else we got to establish, is that GMO, a lot of these scientists, these so-called scientists, want to say that everything's genetically modified. Okay, that's your semantic argument. Everything's genetically modified, but not everything is genetically engineered. Not everything is selectively bred. The majority of our food, like apples, are selectively bred. They, over thousands of years, right? Humans have selected which apples are the best based on taste, color, aroma, all this stuff. And it's like that for all foods. Corn originally was like that, but now almost all corn is now genetically engineered, specifically because they grow so much of it all over the United States being engineered. And I'll get into it in another podcast about what I think about that whole situation. I really think it's like essentially criminal that these people took Monsanto, Bayer, all these other chemical ag companies. They modified the genome of corn and have basically grown it everywhere. And so now corn is contaminating. Corn is contaminating the entire freaking the entire natural corn supply. So it's like farmers can't really. It's risky for farmers to save their own seeds, corn seeds, because what happens is now if they save their seeds, a neighboring genetically engineered cornfield could contaminate, and it happens all the time, could contaminate the heirloom corn or the natural corn, the natural selectively bred corn, and destroy those genetics by pollinating engineered genes. And not only that, but there's just like more wild stuff that we don't even understand about the genome. We don't understand enough about genome science. They act like they do, but we don't, because we can't even. We don't know what everything. We don't know how transcription fully works. We don't know what causes. I mean, at least it's not public knowledge. It's possible that the biotech industry has much more specific information on it, and they're just not telling people about it because it's proprietary or whatever. But it's a very difficult situation, and I might further express a deeper information on GMOs and all that in another episode. This being my first episode, I kind of just want to briskly go over these topics that interest me the most. But yeah, so why it's important to get rid of GMOs, though, right? Is it's a sketchy science, right? Compared to the known history of food through selective breeding, what I was like saying before. So like selective breeding, you're like right. I explained before about the apple, So we've been doing that for thousands of years, right? And so since we've been doing that for thousands of years, that in comparison with like if you do a scientific study and you're comparing scientific data, it's incomparable that you'd never be able to compare the safety of genetically engineered foods to selectively bred foods, because there's only 40 years of genetically engineered science, of genetically engineered crops in known history, and compared to selectively bred crops, there's no comparison. And so any smart scientist would never be able to call these things safe for the public, because we don't know what they're going to do the next generation, third generation, fourth generation down the line. Who knows? Maybe there is some type of problem that these proteins cause, or that these engineered genes cause, to the physiology of humans. And there's a lot of weird, like vague studies that say that GMOs are dangerous, but there's really not a lot of definitive information, because there's so much money that goes into suppressing genetically engineered, anti-genetically engineered crop science. And so, yeah, and so you'll hear like if you check labels, your label will say bioengineered, and so that's the same thing as genetically engineered. And it used to be referred to as GMO, and you'll see like non-GMO, and it's just it's a difficult argument to bring about if they are like really necessary. I don't think that they're necessary. It's more of a moral argument now, and it's because, like I said, that you can't make that comparison that it's safe or not. But not only that, is that to engineer something that was not naturally found in nature, and now to allow it to breed openly in the environment, right? It's a problem, because you're not allowing, especially culturally, like many like Mesoamerican cultures have been basically been the stewards of corn and many plants, especially even like, I'm not sure where papaya comes from originally, but these cultures have been the stewards of corn for thousands of years. And just like that, in 40 years, almost all corn is now contaminated with GMO genes like Bt toxin. And so Bt toxin is, here's something that's really like, this should outlaw all GMOs in general. Bt toxin was originally a bacteria toxin, right? It was a bacteria from a toxin that was used as a topical pesticide, right? So it was used as a topical pesticide for corn. And so what they did, they took the gene, right, that was expressed by this bacteria. This is the funny thing is, this science I learned, I did biotech stuff at NCSU. I learned a lot about how biotech works. Like I did cloning of bacteria. I didn't exactly do the plant science, plant engineering, but it's a very similar like concept of engineering, and how they basically infect the plant with the engineered genes. And so what I was saying is the corn is, oh man, so this is why I'm not going to be great at a podcast, right? I'm not going to be great at, and I see an ant. There's an ant crawling behind the wall on my camera, and it's been so distracting me. So corn, Bt toxin, right? That's what I was talking about. Okay, so Bt toxin, right? they took the gene out of the bacteria that creates Bt toxin and they put it in the corn plant, right? And so now the corn produces um, the Bt toxin, right, in the plant. So now it's creating these proteins called cryoproteins, right? And so these proteins in the pest, it's called like a corn borer. And so in the bug that's eating the corn plant, it causes its stomach to explode, right? Okay, odd. And you'll hear people like say, "Oh, I can't eat this, I can't eat that. I get too full in America if I'm eating this food in America." Well, it might be because of something like this. So keep listening. Um, so the plant now, the corn expresses the Bt toxin, and it's now in the food. The pesticide is now in the food. And for all you like carnivore advocates and stuff like that, people were like, "Oh, don't eat only meat and stuff like that." The Bt toxin, right, is being fed through the corn to plants, and that literally bioaccumulates in the animal. So if you're eating meat, you're eating beef all the time, you're literally getting these toxins in like low dose amounts over and over, and they're just accumulating in your body, and they don't leave the body like too readily. You're not just pissing it out, just like that. It sticks around in your fat cells, like many toxins in your environment, which I'll go into estrogens and plastics and stuff like that, and phytoestrogens. Um, but so Bt toxin is basically being indirect, like we're indirectly getting this Bt toxin now. And so the safety studies on Bt toxin that they use for GMOs, right? They declared that GMOs are grass, generally recognized as safe. And so there was no safety studies. There's no safety studies that like they would for like a food additive that the FDA tests. None of that happened for GMOs. They passed this stuff as grass, saying it's just generally recognized as safe, even though they engineered a pesticide into the food, right? Bt toxin. Okay, so now that this is what happens, dude. I'm a stoner, and I'll just forget my my train of thought. But this is where this is gonna help me. So I'll stick to my guns here. But so yeah, so now with the Bt toxin in the food, I'm gonna like review this podcast and be like, oh, I missed talking about. My notes have got to be a little bit better. I didn't even think I was gonna talk about Bt toxin, but maybe I'll continue on at another time in another episode more, so I'll get my notes better. But yeah, so now, the safety studies. This is what I'm talking about. Okay, so the safety studies for Bt toxin, the same safety studies that they use for the engineered Bt toxin corn, right? The corn that expresses Bt toxin. The same safety studies are the ones that they use for the safety studies from the topical studies that they did. So they're using the same safety studies from the topical pesticide of Bt toxin as for the corn engineered corn version that contains the Bt toxin, right? And so they're saying that the GMO corn, the genetically engineered corn with the Bt toxin, I say Bt toxin, but they're saying that is safe because of the safety studies with the topical Bt toxin, right? There is very little safety studies on Bt toxin from engineered corn and saying that it's safe, okay? And so basically it's a sham, because what's happening and what could be happening is that there's multiple isomers of Bt toxin. You get the word isomers, right? So what an isomer is a molecule, right? If you're looking at the molecule of Bt toxin, right? It's like a little, those little hexagons and stuff, like little, shapes and stuff like that, with the carbons breaking off. I, did pretty well in organic chemistry, but for me to explain it like this is a little more difficult. But so there's different varieties of this same molecule, right? They all like have like mirror like it mirrors itself, like, you know, or there's like a hydrogen is shifted one way, or a carbon shifted one way, and it creates like a different. It's the same molecule, but it creates a different like type of type of molecule that affects us physiologically differently, and they could have stronger toxicological effects. It could have, uh, you know, weaker toxicological effects. I literally almost went to school for got my master's in toxicology. I didn't because I have an autoimmune disorder that's been affecting me as I go to school, unfortunately. But which I'll express that later. I have some secrets to healing autoimmune disorders, and so another episode. Uh, but so with with the different isomers, right? So they're using the safety studies from the topical BT toxin, and they're using it to say that it's safe because, you know, it's engineered down to the corn. They're like, oh no, it's safe, but there's no safety studies that would say that, you know, that, you know, there could be a certain percentage of this corn that's producing a more toxic BT toxin, the cry proteins, a more toxic version. It could be, you know, theoretically, it could be, you know, it's percentages. So it's not just like, you know, on or off. These are like percentages of different molecules. So it's the corn's creating this molecule, right? But it's creating different varying percentages of of the toxin, and this is where they don't understand the genome, because they don't know, like, they can't, for them to like measure this, um, you know, for them to be able to statistically research and study like what isomer is being formed by the corn, like most statistically prevalent isomers being formed of the cry proteins of the molecule, the BT toxin. Um, for them to study that over and over again, it would be like almost like a fallacy, right? Because their study, their the way they do their studies is so standardized and is incomparable to a study like in the real world, like a farmer in his field, right? They'd have to literally constantly be like studying this all the time over and over again, to like year after year after year, and just to determine what's happening and where. Because with the way transcription works, nutrients in soil, the climate, so many things, there's so many variables in the natural environment that you can't compare a standardization like study, a standardized study, to a natural, like a naturally grown crop of a engineered, you know, it's saying naturally grown, but it's, you know, it's dumb to say that because it's not natural at all. But it being grown in the open environment, not like in a laboratory, in a standardized, you know, laboratory setting or a field laboratory setting, the difference between a farmer growing it and a scientist growing it, and not only that, but like hundreds of farmers growing this crop, it changes the transcription. The potential for it to change is so vast, and it's almost like it's impossible to predict what isomer is going to be most prevalent over and over again. And so that's really where the science is so flawed in GMOs, and so and it's dangerous. Right? GMOs are extremely dangerous and bad for the environment, and specifically because they contaminate other fields, as I was explaining before, how they contaminate. And so what's happening now, this is what's wild, right? So rice, there's no legalized rice being grown anywhere in the world. GMO rice is there's none of it's been legalized, but it's studied all the time. You might have heard of golden rice, where they engineer a gene into rice to create more vitamin A, and it makes the the rice yellow, and it has vitamin A in it. It's like you think, oh, that's cool, right? Oh, more vitamin A, for people who are deficient in vitamin A. Or like vitamin A is like a very easy vitamin to get, right? Like carrots, very high in vitamin A, right? Vitamin A is in like a lot of things. But not only that, but vitamin A can also be very toxic, especially to pregnant women. And so vitamin A causes like literal like mutations in children, and it's called it's like a genotoxicity. I believe that's what it is. I might be slightly wrong on the word, but so it causes like mutations in or developmental problems in developing children in the womb, and so that's vitamin A. And so that vitamin A usually if it's plant-based vitamin A, it's not toxic to pregnant women, right? So if it's plant-based vitamin A, it's not toxic to women. But they don't know that with rice. Like nobody knows that. Like they can study that over and over again, but like I said, depending on the transcription and the environment that the rice is being grown in, the microclimate, everything as I was explaining with the corn, it might express some type of toxic vitamin A. And so, with the way these biotech, people work, you really can't trust anything these people do. And at least I don't. And I know it's kind of like sounds conspiratorial, but it's completely unnecessary. And so the rice, no rice legal to grow anywhere in the world. There's no rice that's legal to grow anywhere. It's just been studied. It's being studied on research farms in India and China, the United States. And so, but it's the most contaminated plant out of all crops, which means rice is contaminating wild varieties and selectively bred varieties greater than corn and greater than anywhere else. And so that means these people that are and 80%, I think it was, I forget what it was. I have the study here that I'll link in the description, but it was like 80% of like the world's like carbs or something like that. Some wild number. I'm not even gonna say because but there's a large amount of people that get their calorie intake from rice. Like a large portion of the world is getting their calorie intake from rice, and there's not many regulatory bodies, right, that are monitoring these contaminations. So people are just potentially being contaminated here, and yeah. So we're gonna take a break real quick. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure my camera was still running. It's my first podcast. I gotta make sure everything's good. So yeah, so rice is contaminating the global GMO rice, genetically engineered rice, is contaminating the global rice supply. Right? It's the most it contaminates more things than GMO rice is contaminating. I don't even know how to word this. It's contaminating more often than even corn or soybean or canola here in the United States. But that raises the suspicion that is there enough like regulatory bodies, surveilling the genes of our food chains, like logistics, supply chain, and the way things are being grown. And it causes a major concern to me, and I'm sure it causes a major concern. It should cause a major concern to you. That I mean, you might not, but it's an issue to where people are putting, like I said, toxic, molecules and genes that create toxic substances like Bt toxin, like potentially a toxic version of vitamin A, plenty of other stuff that they're working on that's just being researched, on farms that can just out in the open that could spread to a natural, like an organic farm down the street, a guy who could be saving his corn seeds, down the street. And I live around a bunch of GMO cornfields, right? I know they're GMO because I'm driving past it and there's not a weed in the field. So they plant the corn, they spray with the Roundup, and so the Roundup, if you don't know, there's corn varieties, not only Bt toxin varieties, but there's corn varieties that are resistant to Roundup. And you might have heard a lot about Roundup and its toxicity. And so they just spray Roundup on the corn plant, and just it kills everything around it, doesn't kill the corn. And so does that sound suspicious to you? It might not, but it should. And so really, any type of substance that is wiping away all types of life should be suspicious to you. And it's interesting. And I find it's kind of depressing sometimes. I just think that like that's our world, where they need such a production system. And I think it's all just based off of land ownership. And this is the problem with capitalism today. So I don't have a problem with like enterprise, free enterprise. I love free enterprise. It's great, but we need greater types of regulation, like some type of a post-capitalist society where we're not we're not profiting like millions and billions of dollars off of food production every year, right? So it's interesting how we need like a system that protects farmers, protects farm laborers, from especially a lot of things that they're exposed to. And it's a tough. I'm out there in the farm today. It was like almost 100 degrees today, and it's a tough life. It's a tough job, but it's so important. It's critically important, and we need to protect our farm laborers at all costs. And they're extremely valuable resources. And yeah, it's really important. We need to protect our crops, and we need to protect the people who farm them and are working the fields all the time. And I think it's one of the most important things in the world. And I think the more we purify our food system and build our food system with compassion, the greater our communion will be in our communities, the greater our connection to the people around us, and the world will be. Because if you care about food, it spawns out so much better things. It spawns out so much greater goodness into the world, and it's so important. And I hope if you hear this and you weren't totally understood what GMOs are, and if I hopefully explained it like pretty good, that you might start buying organic food, because organic food is so important. Not only because of the GMO aspect, right? But because of what's called free radicals, right? So chemical pesticides, chemical fertilizers, all that type of stuff, especially even plastics, phthalates, all this stuff being used in agriculture causes free radicals to form in your cell membranes. And free radicals are basically destroy cell membranes, and they cause you to age faster, right? Or they cause inflammation or disease. And so it's a lot of problems with free radicals that are not understood. It's not understood too well. But the best thing you do about your battle against free radicals and your exposure to free radical causing substances is to go organic, right? Okay, because organic has a reduced amount of free radicals. And not only that, but the antioxidants in like fruit and berries and vegetables, the antioxidants in this stuff are being canceled out by the chemical pesticides and the chemical fertilizers that are being inundated in these plants that everybody consumes, right? And so it's really important to go fully organic, because you're reducing your exposure to these free radicals, and you're increasing the amount of antioxidants that you're getting from food. And it's really important. Okay? And so it's important to create this type of food system where where we have like even dining halls, right? Dining halls down the street. We have public school systems where children are communing together, having lunch or breakfast. and people don't realize how important that is. Like that's such an asset to like a society, because these organized bodies where taxpayer money is going to, buy food and to prepare it for a group of people, it's an asset, because now you have the ability, you have a buyer, you have buying power, right? Through tax, but you have buying power, collective buying power, where you can say, we're going to buy food from this local farmer, and we're going to support this local farmer to keep growing this food that not sprayed with chemical pesticides, all this stuff. And so what that does is that spawns out an economic system that creates more farmers. It creates a demand for more clean food, right? It creates more and more farmers, right? And so less chemical pesticides being sprayed, more organic food, and these systems, like public school systems, like college, like dining halls, this collective buying power for food is so important. We need more dining halls. Like, imagine a world where like socialized dining halls, right? I'm technically a socialist, right? I'm not a communist. I'm not for communist structure, but I am for like regulated government bodies where people are putting their taxpayer money together. Why not put taxpayer money towards things that we all use, right? We all pay for tax, right? We all pay into tax, right? It's like a dues. It's like a dues to like one like big, group of people, one big gang, right? Really, we're all paying dues to one big gang. It's the United States of America, here in the United States, and even other countries can implement this. And just socialized dining halls where taxpayer money is going to provide, not rations. Okay, this is where people are going to try to say like, oh, the bread lines. No, 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 no. All right, you still have your for-profit systems today, but we can slowly start to implement these systems where we're growing these regenerative food systems that are protecting the soil, protecting the environment, and protecting people, right? With clean food, clean, nutritious food. And it's honestly very easy. It sounds like it's difficult. It's obviously easier said than done, right? But with taxpayer money, right? Like I said, they're putting $500 billion into AI. That's all going to go to probably some ChatGPT type app that's just bullshit. That, you're like, no, I didn't say this, I said that, type shit, which happens to me all in ChatGPT all the time. But if we put $500 billion into the American agricultural system to supply, like 3 meals a day, just a basic like implementation of 3 meals a day to like, a collective dining hall system where there's, grilled chicken, maybe beef, and these systems like that. And, obviously a focus on stuff that's more effectively grown in mass production, and not so damaging for the environment at the same time. Like, like there's a lot of crops like that, like stuff that's produced. I can't, I don't want to start spouting off stuff on the top of my head where someone will go, no, it's not good for the environment. But there's a lot of stuff like that, like especially rice. Like rice, you can grow so much rice organically, not this GMO shit. You can grow so much rice and be able to feed so much people, and it's just, it's so important to be able to like even just have something like that, like a socialized dining hall where they're buying all this rice that's organically grown. Think of how powerful that is, where a government will just supply and pay for farmers to build infrastructure, to buy the agricultural inputs like seeds and all that stuff to be able to produce food. It creates, what it does for a governing body, say like the United States of America, it creates a revolving system. Say the United States of America put $1 trillion, $1 trillion into creating a food system of socialized dining halls, of organic farmers, providing free food to people that like, make, less than $300,000 a year, right? So providing food, free food to those people, it creates a round table system, right? So now, for the most part, besides if you account for maybe like 25% of that $1 trillion maybe leaves the loop every year. And this loop is where starts with the government, right? Taxpayer money is funding farmers to grow food, right? Farmers grow food, they supply it to the dining halls. The dining halls purchase the food, right? So that farmer is, now getting paid to buy the dining halls to supply food, right? And he was given, like what, like a small interest loan to create infrastructure, right? And so now the farmer can pay back his loan to the government through the money he's making, but it's like the government paying the government itself, right? And so it creates this loop system. And so you say like maybe 75% to 80% of all food must be domestic. Like, so you said a tariff. So this money doesn't leave the system, right? It sounds very complicated, but it's economically feasible to create a roundtable agricultural system that's separate from the mainstream economy, right? And for-profit systems. If everything's out of necessity, right? If we're growing food out of necessity and we're using, advanced technology where farmers don't have to, put in so much effort. We're using robotics and AI, and we're growing clean food with like robotics and AI to be able to, pull weeds and instead of spraying them away, being able to, analyze soil in real time and knowing how much fertilizer to put into the soil, organic fertilizer, to be able to, not be wasting fertilizer and not have like runoff, and being able to, use drones to like surveil the, the landscape and to prevent erosion and all this type of stuff. And saving water conservation, knowing how much moisture is in the soil, implementing all this technology in like a one giant system, right, could provide so much food to the entire country, let alone the world. And we could create such a beautiful, beautiful system where there's so much food and all that, but the United States government doesn't want it. They're not for it. There was a UN resolution to basically make food free for the whole world, which would have been an amazing thing. And the United States was like, no, we don't want it. And it's suspicious because I've worked in places, right? I've worked in places like nursing homes, right? Okay, so I was a cook in a nursing home for a little bit, and I enjoyed it. I like making food and stuff like that, so I like cooking. And even though I have a freaking degree, I was working as a cook for a little bit. It happens to a lot of people. But so I'm looking at these ingredients, right? And I'm like, margarine, right? What's margarine made of? Like all soybean oil, GMO soybean oil. So it's just sprayed with Roundup. If you're holding this butter, you could smell the Roundup off. I'm kidding, obviously, when I say that, but old people would come into this nursing home, right? They would come to this nursing home. This shit's like should be criminal. Okay, old people come to the nursing home. One guy, right? I remember this story. He came in with kidney problems, right? This guy had kidney problems, and he left, died of a heart attack. Okay, and so that's the problem that is facing society. And I'm looking at these ingredients, and I'm like thinking, I could add like 10 years, 10, 15 years to all these people's lives just by cleaning the food and all the food being organic and people's diets being monitored. I went to school for nutrition for a little bit too, so I know a lot about nutrition, and I know a lot of. I've been on an organic diet, organic non-GMO diet. Obviously, organic means non-GMO, but I've been on an organic diet. I was vegan for 7 years. I was, since 2010, I started working on organic farms, and ever since then, it's past 15 years, I've been like really, really sturdily into organics, and I think it's the most important thing in the world. I think it's the most important thing for your children. I think children being exposed to pesticides and chemically treated foods is probably the worst thing for their development. And I think it's really criminal that these corporations are, you know, that are doing this. Let alone politicians are allowing to do this. Politicians are just taking money from lobbyists, and they don't even need to take money from them anymore. It's just so inundated into American culture is to allow these corporations to just, you know, be subsidized by the government and to grow GMOs. And that's what's happening. That's the problem with our agricultural system is GMOs are being subsidized by the government. Okay, that's why you go to the store, food is so cheap. All right, you see, I went to the store and I saw there was fucking like chicken wing drumsticks were like $2. Purdue drumsticks were like $2, right, for like a 5-pack of drumsticks, right? And then you go look at the organic versions. The organics are like, you know, twice as much. It was like $4, right, $4 or $5 for drumsticks, which is like, you know, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. But then you get the you know, the chicken breast and all that stuff. It's much more expensive, right? The chicken, like a whole broiler chicken's like $20, $22, $20 in that area. Like you're not going to see anything up to like 25 because that's going to be like, I think, a really big bird. But the Purdue chicken of the same size is going to be like $10. So it's almost like twice as much money for chicken, right? And so let's get into why that's happening is because the government is subsidizing the feed. The government is subsidizing all this GMO corn. So imagine if the government subsidized the infrastructure to store organic corn, to grow organic corn. You know, the price would be probably identical if we had just as many farmers growing and growing organic food, being subsidized just as much to grow organic food just as much as they do with GMOs. Food would be the same price. And everyone wants to say, oh, this, you know, you can't grow organically with like and supply that much. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. There is so much unused land out there. They want to marginalize farmers and to increase profits using the least amount of resources as possible. That's economics, okay? And so, like I said before, there can be a simple system that creates a roundtable system where food is grown out of necessity, out of what we need, and creating a surplus of a necessity for a surplus of food. And what's happening now is they're growing food for profit, to make so much money, and profit is not a necessity. It's not a necessity to make $1 billion a year selling cornflakes, you know, selling chicken. It should be criminal. It should be criminal, and all these companies need to be like literally, they need to be thrown out. And it's unfortunate that the buying power is all we have right now. But most people aren't thinking, you know, oh, we need to be buying organic because it's politically important, you know. It's a very difficult situation. It gets me fired up because I care deeply about this. I care very strongly about our food system and about farmers and about how people are farming, about our environment, about the food people are eating. Something I care very deeply about. And I hope to be able, like, this podcast will be a great resource for people for information on stuff like this. And so I'm hoping into the future there'll be more, I'll be able to provide more information, more motivation for people to buy organic food because it's so important. But on top of that, right? So I talked about GMOs, right? And so GMOs, like, it's really important for us to surveil, if that's even a word. We need surveillance systems, greater regulatory bodies, you know, preferably through the UN, right? We should have the UN, sorry, I'm like burping. We should have the UN should have like some type of system, or, you know, even fuck the UN. It should be like some other. I want to create this shit, but I just don't know how to like do nonprofits. I think eventually, hopefully, you know, with maybe some of you guys out there, maybe we could get a regulatory system together over the whole world that monitors these companies for what they're doing. Testing food, right? Testing supply chain, like grain and supply chain. That's one of the major sources of contamination is commingling of grain, right? These same companies that are like growing grain, they're growing it like Purdue, they grow organic chicken, right? And so they have farmers that are growing organic grain, and they have farmers that are growing conventional grain. So what are the odds that these fucking excuse my, I'm gonna have to beep that out. Um, what are the odds that this grain, this GMO grain, this organic grain, commingles and mixes together? And it's highly likely. It's happening all the time. It's happening all the time. In fact, all organic food can be 95% organic. So that means they could literally be giving 5% of grain, GMO grain, to these animals, and you'd never know because these residues aren't going to show up on anything. And so if you go to like somewhere like your store, they'll have their organic bananas right next to their conventional bananas, and it's that simple of just like mixing up the two. And especially with how greedy these people are, who's to say they're not doing that on purpose? Because, like I said, the GMO grain is subsidized, so it's cheaper for them to grow that, and so it's a lower cost to have this GMO grain. They could just literally, dilute, like they're bad drug dealers. They could just literally dilute the corn, the organic corn, with GMO corn, right? And then it could be just feeding it to the food animals. And so it's definitely a difficult situation, and we need these surveillance systems. And so what I came up with, I took a metagenomics class in all the way back in NCSU back in 2022, and everything's 2022, right? But It was right after COVID was basically exiting. Still COVID was still there, I think, though. But so a metagenomic system that monitors blight, monitors the health of people, monitors the genomes of, probably people probably sketched out to think that monitoring the genome of people, but it could be important, as far as health wise, and understanding more about pathogenetics of people, and whatever illnesses, maybe ailments they may have, and yeah, and so also including monitoring the genome of like plants and animals everywhere, and just monitoring the system, the whole world, for engineered genes, because it is so easy now. It is so easy and I could literally get an incubator, fucking micro, just the F word again. Sorry, a micro pipette, some buffer, a lot of like substances that are easily available on the internet, and I can freaking engineer a couple other machines that are like, you get them used for like less than $1,000 off the internet, and I can start making GMO organisms right right here in this podcast studio. And it's and same thing with plants, and they could be anything. They could be anything. And especially people want to talk about Chinese farms in America. Chinese farms could literally be creating, and no offense, like to I love, I'm not saying the Chinese government is, but there's a lot to be said about that I probably won't express right now here, which I'd probably have to think slightly more about. If, depending on if China takes over the world, dude, I don't want this coming back to me. And they have their own secret polices in the United States already. So check that out. There's a Chinese secret police in New York City apparently, and I guess monitoring Chinese nationals, but who knows? And but they could be literally creating bioweapons from crops on their farms that are right adjacent to other farms. Right? They're saying that they could be monitoring U.S. military bases, but how true is that? But they could also be creating bioweapons that put toxic genes, toxic traits into pathogenic traits into crops like corn, and could be getting into the food supply. And so it's so important to monitor the genes of plants these days. It's so important, and all organisms rather, especially blight. I mean, how fucked up would it be? There's the F word again. I keep saying the F word. Sorry. How messed up would it be if we created, it'd be great if we created an entire organic food system. It'd be amazing if we created an entire organic food system. Everything's organic. That sounds like a dream to me. It sounds like, the Wizard of Oz. Your dreams do really come true, right? Where blue. I'll get into that one day, right? um, that whole song. That song's interesting. But the Dorothy song. But how interesting would it be, or messed up would it be, if we had this organic food system and we got hit with like blight, like a pandemic engineered blight made by the biotech industry, who has so much to gain off of something like that, right? So if everything went organic, what happens to these biotech companies? They don't become as necessary anymore. These chemical ag companies, their patents all go. They have patents on food, on crops that were created over thousands of years, right? The Mesoamerican cultures in South America stewarded corn for thousands of years, right? And now we have chemical ag companies who are like, no, we own this plant. They're saying we own the corn plant. I mean, that should be like so illegal. That should be so illegal. And there was some stuff over that they're now like the United States is like forcing Mexico to grow GMOs now because of like a contract that they had. I mean, it should be so freaking criminal. This Mexico has more of a right to corn than the United States has. I mean, the Mesoamerican cultures, like these people had corn, stewarding corn for thousands of years, right? That declares much more ownership over corn than European cultures who, like Bayer, who now own patented varieties of corn that are being grown all over the United States and are contaminating natural varieties. And soon, if things keep going the way they will, there won't be any natural corn anymore. There won't be any natural stuff anymore like this. And this is why they have these doomsday seed vaults in Norway, or what is it called? There's like an island up in the Scandinavia, up above Scandinavia. Like it's a doomsday seed vault. And everyone's like, oh, it's for the end of the world. It's not for the end of the world. It's because these biotech elites have decided that it's going to be an all-out war on nature to try to control nature with engineered genes, and so they're gonna keep doing this if we don't stop them. And as I've told you, it's just gonna get worse and worse. And it's not just plants; it's salmon now, it's fish, and it's they're using animals now and engineering animals. They made, and this is like, it's one thing if like you're engineering stuff and manufacturing things that you can control the breeding of it very strictly. Like they made bulletproof spider web, right? Using goats. So I'll put a link in the description. But so they took a really strong spider, like from a silk spider. They took a very strong that gene that creates that very strong spider web material from that spider. They took that gene out and they put it in a goat. So the goat was expressing this spider silk, and so they use it to create like bulletproof vests, right? And so a lot of this, all these things, at the end of the day, it all goes back to the U.S. military and military asset type of like manufacturing, and this was with PFAS and all that stuff like that. Yeah, so animals are being like now engineered and just being let loose. And so in Brazil, there's a river in Brazil that's contaminated by glowing fish. They're called glowfish, and so there's these like fluorescent fish that are just swimming around in this river. Out competing other fish because they were engineered to be like you know, durable fish, and so now they're out competing fish for food resources, other fish, the natural wild fish, and and they're out competing, and sooner or later, and it's already happened. They've already inundated the whole river, but sooner or later they will probably grow to more and more rivers if they're not managed. The whole population is not managed, and so what's happening now with salmon? I forget the name of the salmon. There's like a whole name of the salmon, but there's genetically engineered salmon now. They're being farmed in the ocean, right? They're farmed in these large like net enclosures in the ocean, right? And so the fish are like in there. They're vaccinated. They get all this messed up stuff that happens with them, just to keep them from getting fucked up. There's another swear word, and I'm gonna have to go back and edit this. I was hoping I didn't have to edit this. And so those fish literally have it's been said that they can escape from the fish farm and go out into the not into the sea, and apparently they attack wild salmon. So these genetically engineered salmon, because they're engineered with growth hormones, so they have a engineered gene that expresses a larger amount of growth hormone, so they're bigger fish, right? And so now they have growth hormone. They're more aggressive, and so they're attacking the other wild salmon out in the wild in the ocean. And so, and not only that, but they can breed with the other wild salmon. And so now sooner or later, these genetically engineered fish, are just going to overtake the wild variety of salmon that we know today. And it's this is like a heavy topic, and it's just so important that we monitor genetically engineered organisms like very strictly over the whole world. And like I said, there already is systems in play. Like there's countries in Europe, like Russia. I forget some of the other countries in Europe. I gotta look it up. I don't want to say anything and be wrong. But they already outlaw this stuff. They already are like, no, we don't like GMOs, and they're like, we don't want GMOs being grown. And so, and it's just odd how NATO is pushing GMOs in Ukraine, and all these biotech companies are just pushing this technology and having free reign right now to be able to use this technology. And I think it's dangerous because it can seem like it's a weapon, right? It can be used to control the world, right? And it's bringing us closer to a world where we might be stuck with manufactured resources. So, and I'll probably end this with this right here, is that if we're not careful, we could be living in a world where everything we have is going to need to be manufactured through some type of industrial process. Not out of necessity, because there's so many people crammed into one little area. Like we live in cities, there's so much room to have beautiful, cities that grow food organically and cleanly and healthily. We got to be careful of these systems that are making us reliant on manufactured resources. What's happening is stuff like pesticides and pollution are destroying the natural environment and are pushing us closer and closer to a world where everything is going to need to be manufactured for our survival here on planet Earth. So it's really important for us to buy organic food and to support organic farmers, because that's the foundation. It's the foundation for our survival here on planet Earth, is supporting organic farmers and supporting food that's grown cleanly and without all this junk. So that's what I wanted to say, and hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. This is the SPACECARATZ podcast, and hope you subscribe to my channel, and in the future, look out for my next episode. All right, later.